session, whose title is Redistributive Effect. I've gone through the papers in this section and I've seen that there are several topics and several approaches related to redistribution. So I will start with my paper in which we discuss geographical distribution. So as you see, the title of the paper is Assessing the Regional Redistributive Effect of Renewable Power Production through a Spot Market Algorithm Simulator, the case of Italy. This paper is co-authored with Anna Creti and Stanislao Gualdi. I did introduce myself. At present, I'm a researcher at the Climate Economic Chair and Energy and Prosperity Chair in Paris. And I worked, as most of you, on topic of electricity market and renewables. So, okay. The reason behind this paper, this research, is the fact that as you know, the renewables have experienced a large expansion worldwide, especially thanks to the large support policies implemented in the whole world. There has been a large literature focusing on the effect of increasing renewable production on the wholesale electricity markets. And mainly, this literature has focused on the so-called merit order effect, which I think most of you already know what it is. And but more recent literature has tried to go in deep on the analysis of this effect and has highlighted three main results. The first is the fact that the merit order effect may not occur as straightforwardly as it is acknowledged in the first time literature, because there are some hours in which the price may decrease thanks to the substitution effect, and some other hours in which the price may indeed increase because of strategic behaviors. The fact that renewables cannot be treated as a single technology because different technologies can displace different units, and so the substitution effect varies according to the technology considered. And then there are other papers which have focused on the interconnected markets or zonal markets, in which the merit order effect may occur not as straightforwardly as one can imagine, because of the fact that there are some localization effect and there are some congestion effect. What we decided to do is to go into deeper analysis of the effect of renewables on the wholesale electricity markets by developing an algorithm which is called MIDAS for the Italian day-ahead market solver, which simulates the hourly equilibrium in terms of price and quantity of the Italian day-ahead markets, taking into account especially the transmission constraints which exist across the zones and the imports from the neighboring countries. What is interesting of this algorithm is that we can rely on a large amount of data. We have more than 80 million hourly observation, and we can train our algorithm on a large database, and then we can use to simulate possible consequences of increasing renewables on different locations and at different hours. What we do is to study the effect on prices, which are the most common considered variable in the literature, but also on generation mix, on congestion, and on zonal balance between supply and demand. Why Italy? The reasons are multiple. The first reason is that Italy has a very particular generation mix, which is due to the fact that we don't have a nuclear generation, and there has been a large increase in renewable generation in the last years. That the fact is that Italy has very challenging targets for solar and wind production, we have to achieve around 73 terawatt hour in 2030 of solar and 41.5 terawatt hour for wind in 2030. So this is a large increase which represent more than 100% for wind and more than 200% increase for solar. We have clearly an interconnected power market in which zonal pricing is implemented and in which congestion has an economic values. And we have a large heterogeneity across zones, which allows us effectively to verify what is the impact of installing renewables in different zones. And then last but not least, market data are publicly available. This was fundamental to implement our algorithm. We focus in particular on the day-ahead market, in which, as in the classical day-ahead market, the participants submit a quantity price pair for each hours, and then all the requests are ranked according to the merit order rule, as in the classic, as in all markets, from the cheapest to the most expensive. The difference between other markets is that the fact there is also a zonal configuration. Therefore, if the national equilibrium respects the transmission constraints between regions, there is a single price. Otherwise, if a constraint is saturated, the geographical market is split into one upstream market and one downstream market. And the auction is repeated on the two south market, taking into account the flows across region. The splitting procedure is iterated until all interzonal constraints are fulfilled. So we can have, in Italy, we'll see in a while, we have main geographical zones. So we can have up to six national prices, six regional prices. So as you see here, we have six, our focus is on the six geographical zones, the white ones. So we have the north, the center south, Sardinia, South, and Sicily. And then we have the foreign zones, which can be interconnected or can be in market coupling. The gray one are in market coupling. And then we have this light gray are some particular zone in which we have, we call the pole or limited production, in which we have just production and not consumption. What is interesting also is that what makes our algorithm a little bit more complicated is the fact that between 2015, the network enjoyed a tree toponymy, but after 2015, a ring has been created in the center part of Italy. Therefore, this creates a little bit of complication in the definition of flows for the algorithm. So just to go a little bit to anticipate the results of our simulation, what we have found is that when we have a market in which we have a zonal pricing, a larger renewable production decrease on average the zonal prices, but the distribution of benefits clearly depends on power plant localization. And the particularity of Italy is that if a supplier gets zonal prices, the consumer pays an average, a unique price, which is called PUN, national unique price, which is a weighted average of zonal prices. Basically, the fact that we have this unique price realize the fact that we don't have the same results if we decide to choose one zone over another for the installation of renewables. In particular, if we concentrate the additional production in the zones with larger demand, we have a larger reduction in the wholesale prices. And according to concerning the technology, we found that solar, as more renewables, allow to achieve the largest reduction in the unique price, especially for small and large increase in supply. And for intermediate increase in supply, solar and wind have the same impact on prices. Another interesting results is that in our database, contrary to what we can think, solar and wind units do not bid always at zero. So basically, we observe a competition between renewables and non-renewable sources, but also within renewable sources. Not only traditional renewable sources like hydro, but also between solar and wind. And we are able also to quantify this substitution effect between renewables and non-renewables and also within renewables. So this is the main results. To build this algorithm, we have used two databases. One database is public, and is the database from the GME, which is the market operator. And we covered the period of 2015-2018. We have hourly information on all the bids and offers submitted in the day-ahead market. We have the import-export quantity resulting from the coupling auction with the neighboring countries, and we have the transmission limits across zones. And then we have matched this database with the private database of an Italian consulting firm, which allows how to distinguish the production technology. There are 17 technologies in our database, but we decided to focus only on the most important 7 technologies, which are solar, small renewables, wind, hydro, and in particular run-of-river hydro, CCGT, coal, and combined heat and power. And we are able to match the technology of a very large part of our of submitted quantities in the database. Our year of reference for the simulation is 2018, but we train our database over the whole period. Here, just to a small, a short graphic, just to show you how different can be the composition of supply in the different zones. So, for instance, in the northern zone here, you see that the CCGT is the largest supply as compared, for instance, to the southern zone here, where CCGT is negligible, and we have a very large quantity of supply produced by wind and solar. A few words about the algorithm, and I won't go into details because the algorithm is quite complicated. The idea is that there is an algorithm which is used by the GME, by the market operator, but this algorithm is not public. According to the documentation, the uniform price auction is solved by finding the equilibrium that maximizes system welfare under constraints. So what we do is to create another algorithm which reproduce the iterative market splitting logic to find the equilibrium. And this algorithm is written in C++, and as I said, this train is using 2015-2018 real hourly bid offer data. And our algorithm, for our algorithm, we have to choose how many iteration we want to run, how many time we want to run our algorithm to find the equilibrium. And finally, for this paper, we consider 10 iteration, which is a good compromise between time and precision, because the larger the iteration, more precise is our algorithm, but the more time consuming also is the algorithm. So just to give you an idea, our algorithm solves all the hourly equilibria for the whole years in less than 1 minute. And then when we find multiple solution, the algorithm selects the one that is associated with the largest social welfare, which is defined as the difference between the price of the bid times the quantity bid minus the sum of the product between the price of the offer times the quantity offered. we have to make some assumptions for our algorithm, since it has a very different logic compared to the original algorithm. So we have to introduce two random elements. The first element is the starting node of our algorithm, because as you see in the left figures, according to the node from which we start the algorithm, we can have different splitting, so different market configuration. And also, as I said before, another important element is the presence of a loop in the central part of the network, which demand us to choose a splitting rule. So here also we use a random element for this part of the algorithm. And just to give you an idea of the performance, here we reported on the left side the differences in euros between the real and the simulated price, and you can see that we can simulate, this is hourly prices, we can simulate around 95% of the prices with an error which is lower than €1. And then if we consider the yearly average, so if we consider that the zonal yearly average, you see that we are able to simulate very closely the real zonal prices. What we do to answer our question, we simulate 7 scenarios. Here we report the simulation. Basically, we increase the supply of wind in the whole country, we increase the solar and the small RES in the whole country, and we compare this solution with some increases in supply concentrated in the southern region or in the northern region. And we do the same for solar. And we consider as increases 1% of the supply, 5%, 10%, and 20%. And we analyze the impact on average prices, zonal and national prices, the accepted quantities, the congestion, and the import-export balance. I don't have time to go into detail, I see, but just to give you an idea, we have clearly evidence of the merit order effect. So when we increase the supply, the price decreases. So what is interesting is that we compare this scenario with the baseline scenario in which we increase by the same quantities the gas, the production of gas, because clearly one can say, okay, but if we increase the supply, obviously the price will decrease. So we compare the decrease in price that we obtain when we increase renewables with the decrease in price that we obtain when we increase gas, and we observe clearly a very large decrease in price, a larger decrease in price when we increase renewables. And you see here that when we increase the supply by 20%, the prices decrease by more than €5 per megawatt, and the effect of increasing the solar and wind are very similar. What is interesting is that when we do the heterogeneous increase in the supply, so according to the region in which we install the additional supply, we see a very differentiated merit order effect. So we talk about the zonal merit order effect. And in particular, we observe that in the southern region, the merit order effect is much more important, although since the demand is concentrated in the northern region, the unique price decreased more when we concentrated the supply in the northern region. Therefore, there is a kind of contradiction between the effect that we obtain if we concentrate the supply in the south, so the zonal price decrease, and the effect that we obtain on the demand side when we concentrate the additional supply in the northern region. So there is this difference, and the effect that we obtain with wind and solar are very similar. So basically, increasing the two have very often the same effect, although it seems that solars allow to achieve a largest reduction. So I'm just going through the conclusion. As I said, we also control for the effect on quantities. And here I report just an example for the north. And for the different scenario, we can calculate the reduction of concurrent sources. And what is interesting here is the fact that not only, as I said before, not only we can calculate the reduction of traditional sources, so the famous substitution effect that we want to observe in order to decrease emission, but at the same time, we also observe that there is a competition between solar and wind, and not only solar and wind in the same region, but also across regions. Although the effect across region is much more limited than the competition within the same regions. Okay, and finally, this is probably less straightforward. We have some effect also on congestion. We calculated also what is the impact of congestion of increasing of different configuration. And here as well, we found that increasing the supply in the north has clearly a more favorable effect on congestion. Just some remarks. We can go further in this research, first of all, concerning the simulations, because we do not consider strategic reaction of a traditional supplier, and this can somehow impact our results. And we have also some further step to make in terms of methodologies, because we can still improve the algorithm performance. And because we remark that our algorithm sometimes find the optimal solution, the real solution, but it doesn't pick it according to the rule of maximizing social welfare that we have chosen. So this is our next step for the future to improve our work. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, I'm in time. I don't know if you have questions. I can take some questions right now, or I don't know if you want to. Yeah, I see some hands, so I can. Wait. No. Okay. Ellen, I think there is a question, and Evert also. You raise your hand?
I think it's currently Ali that's raising a question, but yes, I also have one. I was wondering, like, because you're having all these scenarios in the supply curve, do you also think you can add scenarios in the demand curve over there, or don't you expect a lot of changes in the demand in Italy in the coming years?
Now, this is a very good question. Actually, the interesting thing of this algorithm is that we can make almost everything. We can do almost everything, because we have some bits from which we start from, and we can modify these bits and offer as we want. So as what you say is very interesting, because we can imagine, for instance, some effects on the demand concerning, I don't know, more flexibility introduced on the demand side, or some demand side management, which becomes more important, or we can assume that there is a large increase in demand in some northern zone when there is a larger and more important economic development compared to the south, and we can simulate the effect on the market equilibrium as well. We didn't do that, but this is something. I mean, this is something that we could exploit. For the moment, we didn't do that because the truth is that we didn't expect at present very large changes in the demand as we speak, because I mean let's say that the largest part of the demand is concentrated in the north of Italy, and this is not going to change very very significantly in the coming years. But if we want to make some scenarios in the probably in the longest term, it's going to be more interesting to do. Thank you. I think we have to add this consideration in the next step. Thank you.
Yes, I think you can easily like argue with EVs. You can argue a scenario, I think. But I really like the algorithm. I think it's very cool so that you have a lot of data you can use for it. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, for EV also, I didn't think about it, especially with the development. Yeah, of course. We can add this. Thank you. I think that there was probably another question from Filippo.
Firstly, I think Ali was going to ask a question.
Okay.
No, Filippo, you go first.
Okay, no worries.
Sorry, I didn't see you who raised the hand first.
So very interesting presentation, Silvia. I was just wondering, I mean, your algorithm works hour by hour, right? So you simulate an increased supply on the supply curve. So you build a synthetic supply, which shifts to the right with an increase in feed from different types of renewables. I was wondering if you could, for the results, I mean, also for the policy implications, distinguish between off-peak and peak hours. So you can see where the magnitude of solar during peak hours, for instance, where we have the highest peak of production during the day, might be stronger, and you can distinguish and disentangle the effects across zones. That might be interesting also to enhance the power of your results. That was just my comment. So
no, I think it's a very important question because and suggestion. Thank you, because the fact is that for the reasons I say also in the introduction, there is not the effect is not uniform. For sure, if we are gonna distinguish between the peak of peak hours, we are gonna observe different, very different results. And actually, the problem that we have is that if we study the results on hourly terms, we have so many results. I mean, the problem with this paper is that when we try to synthesize the results for the publication, we have a very long paper with very long appendix. So if we consider, because we have 6 zones, so if we consider also 7 scenarios, 6 zones, and we decide at the end to work only on national averages, which is something that somehow reduce the power of our algorithm, because we are able to simulate hourly data and then we discuss yearly averages, which is a kind of, I mean, we really lose something here, but we try to find a synthetic results. And but probably, as you suggest, the idea of at least distinguish between peak of peak can be a good compromise between the idea of including more results and having some synthetic figures to give to the other. This is something that I think can be done, and it's a very interesting suggestion. We didn't think about it. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. It's a very interesting results, especially if we want to observe that, especially for solar, we can have a much larger impact during the peak hours.
Exactly.
Thank you. I'll consider this for to add. Thank you very much.
Nice work anyway.
Thank you. I think there
actually it was my question too, so it's covered now too.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are other questions, otherwise we can go on because I think we are a little bit late. Yeah, we can switch to the following presentation. Let me see. We have penalties in renewable auction. Does one rate for all means less for incumbents? I think it's Ali which is presenting, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
And let me see if I can get this right. So it's in full screen mode now?
Yes, thank you.
So just time myself too. Okay. So I am at Darudi from University of Basel. I'm a postdoctoral researcher there, and this is my joint work with my colleagues there, Ingmar and Hannes. So this is the first time presenting this paper, and the results came out like just 2 weeks ago. So it's really fresh, and I'm looking forward for all sorts of suggestions, recommendations, criticism, and so on. And I'm happy to be presenting it here. So in summary, what I'm going to present here is I'm going to talk about non-realization penalties in renewable auctions. I'm going to answer the question: is it fair to charge everybody the same non-realization penalties? And by everybody, I mean incumbent versus newcomers. And the answer, not surprisingly, is no. It's not fair to charge the same amount. Otherwise, it would not have been a paper. And the reason I'm probably here is that, okay, previous paper was talking about redistribution effects between regions, or geographical redistribution, and maybe here, I'm here because I'm talking about distribution of winning bids between different types of players, incumbent and newcomer. So I will elaborate on why I think it's not fair to charge the same amount of penalty for incumbents and newcomers. So auctions are being extensively used for promotion of renewables. More than 100 countries have used it so far for promotion of renewables. In 2017 and 18, some 100 gigawatt of auctions were held. And promised interest of wind and PV generation. Of course, the start date was a bit later, but in these 2 years, almost 10% increase in capacity of renewables were promised in just only two years. There are some advantages associated with the auctions. One is that the regulator can determine a generation mix ex ante. It calls for an auction, and for example, the regulator says, I want this much capacity in offshore wind, let's say, and then if it realizes, it will the generation mix will be known ex ante, but it is in contrast to the previous types of support policies, like fee-based ones, like feed-in premium and feed-in tariff, in which the regulator would set the support rate, and then it could have easily over or undershoot when it came to real investment, realization investment, depending on the development of the cost. Sudden decrease in cost of PV, rooftop PV in Germany could mean that suddenly in 1 year there is overshoot of investments in PVs in Germany, for example. And then the other advantage is that because there is a competition on the bidding stage, the support cost could decrease for the consumers. For example, one case that I will go into more detail is the German offshore auctions in 2017 and 18, which promised 3 gigawatt of offshore wind capacity to be entered in 2021 until 2025. So there was a bid bond of 100 euros per kilowatt, and this meant that, for example, EnBW, as one of the incumbents in Germany, each won 900 megawatt bid that it had there, and it meant that EnBW paid 90 million euros, and it gets the money back from the regulator only if it realizes their investment. So this is the meaning of the bid bond in this auction in Germany. And auctions are going to be there, remain a thing in Germany, and until 2028, only until 2028, there is going to be 73 more gigawatt of offshore, not offshore, all technologies auctions in Germany. But there is a major problem with auctions, and this is the non-realization risk of auctions. So there is some uncertainties associated with investment in renewables under auctions. It could be on the cost side, and depending on the promotion and the auction design, could be also on the revenue side. And then from the time that the bidder bids in the market, in the auction, and wins the auction, until it starts actually investing into renewables, or even midway, it could realize that it's not worth it. The cost benefit analysis may show that it's not beneficial to invest into renewables, and then it might the winner could not realize its investments at the end. And it has been the case in a lot of auctions in so many different countries for so many different technologies and different years. So non-realization has actually an issue in support for renewables, and it creates some has some negative impacts. If we have the issue of non-realization, obviously we diverge from the target generation mix that we had in mind. Also, this means that some renewable investment will not take place or not take place on time, and then we miss the the environmental targets, which decreases the social acceptance of auctions. And also, if the renewables were to enter the market, because of the merit order effect we talked about in the previous presentation too, if it had entered the market, there would have been a shift of merit order to the right, and then this meant that the price would have decreased. But if the investment does not realize, there will be a period of higher than expected prices until the regulator calls for another auction, sets another starting date, and then a new investor is found and starts investing and actually realize the investment. So it could take a few years. For example, in the case of offshore wind, because it takes a while. It takes actually 1 year to call another auction, and then a few years to realize the investments by the replacing investor. And also, if we set the starting date of the new auction too short, probably it means that the bidders are going to face time challenges, and this probably means that the firms are going to ask for higher support rates. And then all in all, it could increase the procurement cost of the later auctions. And then also, by continuously investing in the technology, let's say offshore wind, the regulator was expecting a learning effect to take place and reduce the cost. But if there are gaps and non-realization issues in between, these learning curves might not be used as planned. So there are solutions to non-realization issue. There is financial pre-qualification, the bid bond that I talked earlier about. In the case of Germany, there could be some physical pre-qualification. For example, the regulator might ask the bidders to ask for feasibility study in the bidding stage. This will be a sunk cost for the bidder, and there could be other types of penalties like exclusion from future auctions. But there is always a trade-off that all these solutions will increase the realization rate, but on the other hand, probably lower the competition or increase the risk premium, or at the end, it increase the support level asked by the bidders. So from now on, when I'm talking about penalties, I'm mostly focusing on the financial pre-qualification, that bid bond that will not be returned to the bidder if it does not realize the investment. So there are empirical analysis which shows that actually these pre-qualification penalties are the reason, are the main drivers of the realization rate, and not so much the technological banding of different technologies together, or the pricing which could have promised a fixed rate to the winner, or a rate on top of the market price. And then heterogeneity of the firm have been also considered in the literature. For example, there is a difference between net present cost bidders, which only look at the net present value of the winning the auction, compared to an option-based cost bidders, who take into account that winning the auction is giving them just an opportunity. It gives them the flexibility, the right to invest into renewables. This is not an obligation per se, it's just a flexibility that they have to invest or not. And if they do that, these type of bidders are going to bid lower in the bidding stage into the auction, and probably exhibit lower realization rate. And then there is a difference between small and large companies, where if there is a high penalty, it deters small actors due to their limited financial capability to handle penalties. But in this paper, I'm not looking into these two cases. I'm looking at the incumbents and newcomers. In incumbents, of course, you can also say, yeah, they are large companies. But in my way of thinking, newcomers could also be large companies. They could be newcomers into this specific market. Like we could be talking about auction in Germany, and the newcomer could be a big company, just not in Germany. So I'm comparing these two things, these two types of companies. And the whole point of the paper is that I say if incumbents are effectively paying less penalty compared to newcomers, and the whole idea is behind the fact that they have some pre-existing capacity in this specific market, and if they don't realize investments into renewables for this period until the new investor is found, the market price would be higher than expected, and this pre-existing capacity is going to produce in the market, generate in the market, and benefit from higher prices. While a newcomer, because it has no pre-existing technology, pre-existing capacity in this market, it cannot benefit from these higher prices. And this gives an edge to the incumbent, and it's as if incumbents are paying lower penalties. And we are going to explain this advantage of incumbent, and as a case study, we look EnBW's 900 megawatt offshore wind and quantify the effects there. And summary is that for every year of delay in entrance of new technology, it's as if EnBW is paying 6% less penalty compared to the newcomer for non-realization. So first, for the sake of simplicity, I look into the case where there's a only single period after the auction, and I look into profits of the newcomer if it realized the investment or not realized the investment. And newcomer, if it invests, actually is going to gain a profit in the market, zero marginal costs, getting some price in the market, and benefit something. And if it doesn't realize, it has to pay a penalty, but doesn't get anything from the market. On the other hand, an incumbent, if it wins and realizes the investment, gets something from the market, but on its pre-existing generation mix is also going to gain something in the market. If it doesn't realize the investment, then it has to pay a penalty, but on the other hand, is going to gain a profit from its pre-existing technology still. It is compared to the newcomer where it had no market profit anymore. And the other thing is that this profit that it's going to make in the case of non-realization is going to be higher because not investing into renewables means that the market price is going to be higher than if the merit order shift had happened. And that's the whole point of the paper. Newcomer is going to pay this much penalty, but the incumbent effectively pays that penalty, but there's a gain that it gets from the difference between this extra profit it gets from non-realization on its own pre-existing technology. And if you're looking for this amount, this is the incumbent's edge and advantage when it comes to penalty. So when we look into multi-period, again, we do the same, it's the same issue. We are going to calculate this difference, and we look into the period that is needed for the new investments to come in from the replacement. After an auction has been called, the new start state has been set, and really the new winner has actually invested into renewables. So the case study is EnBW 900 offshore wind bid that is going to enter the market in 2025. We calculate EnBW's profit in 2025 in the case of realization and not realization of this investment. Using a dispatch model, we assume that incumbent makes profit only from the generation side. The whole point is that every increase in the profit on the generation side, we calculate as an extra profit for the firm. If the firm has some forward commitment, has something on the consumer side, this extra profit increase in market price does not one-to-one mean extra profit for the whole company, but we skip from that point. For now, we assume it takes only 1 year, which is for finding a replacement, which is super optimistic. It's probably going to be multiple years. And then as the model, we use EU mode, which is an hourly dispatch of European markets for 25 countries, including Germany and neighboring countries. And as an input data, we use ENSOE's TYNTB 2020 data set. And for availability of renewables, we use Renewables Ninja. And for capacity of EnBW, we use EnBW's annual reports. So the results are going to be short and straightforward. So we have several weather years because availability factor of the renewable technology could differ depending on the climate year. We have 3 weather years, representative weather years of 82, 84, and 2007, and we calculate EnBW's profit in the case of realization and not realization, and the difference is what we are interested in. And so the whole idea is that by by not the extra benefit that the incumbent has compared to the newcomers is going to be in a weather year like 82 is going to be around 5 million euros, which compared to that 19 million euro penalty that I was talking about is about 5%, it's about 6%, which means that it's as if the incumbent is paying 6% less penalty. And in other weather years, it goes up and down, but it's almost the same here. So climate, the weather is going to affect it, but it's not, the effect is not that huge. So so you might think that, okay, an average of 6 point something could be not that high and crucial, but at the end, there are a few things to take into account. First of all, this is only, we assume only 1 year of delay as a result of not realization by EnBW, which in practice it could be easily a couple of years, 3, even 4 years. So it could go to 20% difference in penalty payment. And the other thing is that just in this case, it was EnBW which has a 12% of generation on the German side, based on 2019 statistics. But for other firms could have and actually have higher generation in the market. And the higher the pre-existing technology generation is, the higher this difference in the profits are going to be. And then also we assume the perfect competition. We had a supposed dispatch model, and if there is imperfect competition, and for example, our EnBW or WE can withhold production, the difference in the market prices would be higher, and then it could have caused higher than the 6% higher effect. And we only model the wholesale. But the other point that could decrease actually the 7%, the 6% average benefit of incumbent is that we only model the wholesale generation profits. We didn't ignore the forward commitment or retail side of the company. So if we had considered that, it could have decreased this by a couple of percent, could have decreased by a bit too. So all in all, for every year of interest delay for this specific case of EnBW 900 megawatt offshore wind, it's as if the incumbent is paying 6% less penalty of non-realization compared to the newcomer, which creates an unlevel playing field in favor of incumbents with large pre-existing generation mix. And what the policy implications are that maybe policymakers want to introduce investor-specific non-realization penalty to level the playing field and also lower the non-realization risk from the incumbents. And also, if not possible, at least the policymakers could need to reduce the time between cancellation deadline of a project and finding and realization of the next round substitute auction, so that the shorter this, because the shorter that the period is, the smaller that the gain of the incumbent is going to be. The shorter the period of higher prices is, the lower the advantage will be for the incumbent. And thank you for your attention, and I will be up for any questions, suggestions, or criticism.
Thank you very much. It was perfectly in time. I see Ellen as a question.
No, it was an applaud emoji.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, if I can. Thank you very much for the presentation. First of all, when I want to say that the topic is very interesting, and I think this is quite original topic, which is very, I would like to compliment you, because I haven't seen this kind of a topic to talk about this topic very much, and on the contrary, I think it's very important. So thank you very much for opening our mind on these new questions. And I was thinking about, I was a little bit surprised by when you showed the different rate of realization in different countries. There is large heterogeneity, yeah, the statistics that you show here. And I was wondering if you are able to relate this heterogeneity to the reason that you showed us as a cause of these delays, which can be, as you say, the market power, which allows incumbent, or which push incumbent to delay investments, since they can gain from this. And I was wondering if it is possible to have a parallel between what you have said, what you have seen in this paper, and this heterogeneity that we observe in reality, according, for instance, to, I don't know, a different level of market concentration or this kind of thing. So this was my first question, because, for instance, what surprised me the most was the fact that when I see the 30% in UK, which is very low compared to, or in Brazil, which is very low compared to the other statistics, and also in Netherlands, you have a very heterogeneous rate of realization according to the year, which, I don't know, can have also other reasons. So it was,
so about the topic, like, I have to say that when we realized, okay, this could be a thing, it was really surprising that nobody had done it, because the idea is quite easy and straightforward, and it was super weird that nobody has done it, because I was sure, I put it off actually for like 6 months, so somebody should have done it. So then I did a research, and okay, apparently there are no papers. So we also were surprised by being such a straightforward idea not being taken up by researchers already. So that was lucky of us, I assume. But about your suggestion, that's actually a really nice suggestion. I per se, I don't know, I have not looked into all of them. I just looked into realization rate, but yeah, comparing that, I could check how much of this non-realization have taken place from the incumbents in that market, if they have won the auction and not realized. And then like, there are so many other issues that could contribute to non-realization rate. But one of them could be, yes, there's that concentration had been high, the incumbents had won, and then the result had increased. Like in the UK, in the first few years, they didn't have much of a penalty rate, so not super low non-realization rate probably was because of that. But in other cases, yes, that would be a good empirical check on whether our results are actually could be validated in real world. Yeah, that's a good follow-up on this. Not follow up like another chapter to check this empirically. That would be really nice. Yeah.
I was thinking also about, because another thing that I would like to see is if there is a different realization rate, as you said, if it is in the reality, actually, if there is a newcomer or an incumbent which is making the investment.
Exactly.
So I can also, yeah, I can find a further justification for what you discussed. And then I was thinking another, I don't know, this is just really a question. It's not. Don't you think that the fact of introducing different penalties will have also a very strong impact on the market structure?
Yes. The thing is that this having lower effective penalty for incumbent makes incumbents have an edge, and it means that they're going to win they're more likely to win next round. And then as they win more, they have more concentration, and again they gain more from non-realization again, which gives them another edge. So it will be a positive loop, a feedback loop here, which gives incumbents an ongoing advantage over time if they continue winning, and then non-realization is a lower problem for them. So that's why, like, one round probably is not a problem, but there is ongoing auctions until, like, I don't know, 2028, like 73 gigawatts only in Germany. So this positive feedback loop is going to create an issue, and then this is going just to create a fair environment for the bidders in the auction. I'm not per se saying that incumbents or newcomers should win the auction, but I'm just saying that it should be fair, and it could be dangerous because it's a positive feedback loop that could go on forever.
Okay, thank you. I think it's just we will just allow a level playing field for all producers. Actually,
yeah.
I was wondering if it can create some, I don't know, some incentives for the incumbents. I don't know, for some behaviors, especially because I was thinking especially of the consequences it may have on the bidding behavior of incumbents on the spot markets, because I think that the amount of, I mean, what is interesting also, I find very interesting in your model, is that you have a model in which you can verify the fact that actually the fact of delaying investments is increasing the pre-existing profits. This is something very, very important.
This is exactly market power. This is exactly market power in other words, because the typical definition of market power is that they withhold production in the spot market, but we are saying that even not realizing something else is as if they have it's not withholding generation in the typical sense, but it's another way of withholding investment. And this is withholding investment from their own side and others from the other side. So they can, by winning the auction and not realizing investment, they have prevented others from entering the market. So this is a different way of exercising market power by incumbents. And they don't even have to, they only need to have a pre-existing technology, pre-existing capacity, generation capacity. It's not, they don't have to be really considering their own effects on the market price and so on. Just having a pre-existing technology capacity, that's enough to exercise this type of market power.
So in such a way, is a kind of okay. We don't have maybe with the more competition on the spot market, we will lose a little bit as incumbent. I will lose a little bit market power, but I can, with the bid on the auction for renewables, I can regain some market power by not investing, something like this. Okay,
yeah,
no, I think it's a very interesting topic actually, because there is also this effect of comparing different strategies on different markets. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I think we can move forward.
Maybe just very quickly, because I totally agree with you. This is a super interesting topic, and my attention, so I'm a bit more on the behavior side, was actually caught one slide earlier, I think, so on this different fines, and it also relates to your latest question, or a couple of slides, maybe, where there's these different sorts, exactly. So I was just wondering, so because I haven't never really heard of this this issue, and so I was maybe, so firms apparently they don't face, or what would happen if, what about reputational effects for the firm? So if it gets public that they kind of violate these aims, then they kind of, I don't know, maybe even violating a social norm or something, and this could affect other income sources from other customers. And also I'm just wondering about the potential maybe to, because the edge is for the incumbent, is there any, because he just have pre-existing capacity, right? But then maybe different sorts of, yeah, like non-financial punishments could be one way to level the playing field, as you said. And I find this really interesting. So maybe it's more comment, but yeah.
Yeah, but in the you're absolutely right, and I didn't put it here in the slide, but you're absolutely right. We thought about directly not financial, but indirectly financial, also issues of a bad reputation for the company. But the type of companies that I'm comparing to each other at this point, there are both big, large incumbents and large newcomers at the same time. So they are big companies in other markets. So for them also, this negative reputation effect is going to be existing for them too. If I'm talking about small newcomers, then yeah, they probably didn't care much about the reputation. But again, big newcomers could also have this reputation issue. Then the effect is going to be the same for them. I assume the effect is going to be the same for both of these type of large companies.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So if there are not any more questions, it's actually 30 minutes now, so I can stop the share and yeah.
I think Ellen can take over. Thank you.
Okay, so normally you should see the screen now.
Yeah.
So yes, my name is Ellen Beckstedde, and I will present to you today my working paper with Leonardo Meus and Erik Delaru called Strategic Behavior in Flexibility Markets, New Games and Sequencing Options. So we keep the discussion on the strategic behavior. We keep it going. Okay, so let me start you by giving some background to this research. So actually we start from the fact that from the clean energy package, DSOs are currently expected to procure flexibility when it is cheaper than expanding their network. And this procurement of this flexibility has been done already in pilot projects, European projects, but overall, like one of the questions that remains is like, where do these flexibility markets fit in the current sequence of electricity markets? And to show you that it's not an obvious question, I included the following figure. So you see the markets that are already there today in the solid lines, but then there's still this dotted line for flexibility markets. And there's like two parameters you can take into account here. First, the integration with other markets, for example, the TSO redispatching market or the balancing market. But there's also like this issue of timing, like when should each market close? So we wanted to look at this in more detail, and we were inspired by two streams of literature to do this. So the first one is on market sequencing options. So this you can see as alternative TSO-DSO coordination schemes, and literature has indicated that it's an important open issue, and also the taxonomy of sequencing options has been studied. But here we thought that like the impact of strategic behavior of flexibility markets is something that wasn't studied extensively yet. So we wanted to analyze this, and for this we used a second stream of literature on the index game. So what is the index game? It's a strategic arbitrage between the wholesale market and the TSO redispatch market. And it's been already studied a lot, both analytically and numerically. And in this paper, we built further on the case of Sarfati, Hesamzadeh in Holmberg, but where they stop at looking at the index game between the wholesale market and the TSO redispatch market, we will take it one step further now by also including this flexibility market and see if these strategic behaviors change. So actually the two market sequences really complement each other. So we combined them and we have the following structure of analysis. So in the remaining of the presentation, I will first talk about the perfect competitive reference case. Then I'll show you what happens if you add strategic behavior with this, and here we find some old and new games that arise. Then we look at more general, the impact of market structure on the performance of sequencing options, and I'll end with the limitations of the model. So what did we find? Overall, two findings, one for each stream of literature. And the first one is that flexibility markets can trigger new games that can already be performed by small players and therefore are a real concern for market surveillance. And the second finding that we had is that nodal pricing performs best, but there is no clear second best under the alternative market sequencing options. So I will build now up to these findings, and I'll start with the methodology and a reference power system. So here you see a schematic overview of the methodology we use. So we look at 4 different market sequencing options. The first one is nodal pricing. So transmission and distribution network constraints are included in the wholesale market clearing. For the second one, we'll have a zonal wholesale market clearing, and then congestion can be created and is solved in an integrated way. So one market that solves both the congestion at transmission and distribution level. And then for the last 2 sequences, the congestion at transmission and distribution level is handled separately, but the order changes. So in the third sequence, you have first the flexibility market, then the TSO redispatching market, and in the last one, it's the other way around. maybe an important assumption that we made here is that we assume that the in the DSO flexibility market, the DSO doesn't have the obligation to solve its imbalance. So therefore, we had to add the balancing market at the end. Yeah. So besides having four sequences, we also look at 2 cases of the BRP, which will be our flexibility provider. So the first case is a perfect competitive case. So in this case, all units are offered to all markets at the marginal cost. But then we also look at strategic behavior. How can you see this? So we have one BRP with a portfolio, and some units are included in the strategic BRP portfolio, and all other units are offered to the market at marginal price. So we only have one BRP in an impact formulation. We don't go further into the into multiple BRPs. Then this is how a reference power system look like, and it is modeled based on a paper of Evert and Schlecht, which is after the case of Germany. So how does the power system look like? We have one node in the north and in the south, both transmission nodes that are connected by a congested line. In the north, there's a coal and diesel power plant, but also 2 wind power plants at the distribution level. One of them is congested, the other one is overly designed. And then in the south, we have a natural gas plant, and all load is connected also here. Then the merit order curve shows the marginal cost and quantity of all the power plants in more detail. So now going further, what happens if we look at the 4 sequencing options, the perfect competitive case and the reference power system, then we get the following results. And to compare the different sequencing options, we look at 2 parameters. So first here, the generation costs, and this is really the sum of all the marginal costs of the units that at the end of the market sequence will supply the demand. Then another parameter we look at is the total cost towards consumer. So this is at each market, what cost goes towards the consumer. So in this one, really the price and the quantity of each market is included. So we see 3 things. The first one is that actually the generation cost at the end for all sequences is the same. So actually the final dispatch is the same. Then if we look at the sequences with congestion management, we see that the redispatch costs are rather similar. There isn't like a real winner we could pick. But if we look at the total cost consumers, we think we can say that nodal pricing has the lowest cost. But now, okay, does this stays this way when we add more strategic behavior? And even before comparing the different sequencing options with strategic behavior, we actually found that it was already interesting to just look at the types of strategic behavior that occur in our model. How did we came to these results? So we actually ran down the merit order curve and each time added some of the units to the strategic BRP portfolio. We analyzed the results and we find that overall there were 6 types of strategic behavior that occurred, 3 old ones, so that are already known in literature, like the price setter game and the index game, but also like 3 new ones that really occur because we added these flexibility markets into the system. And I don't have the time to go into detail here, but overall, to give you some intuition, you can say that the BRP has a strategy of driving up the market prices within the market, a strategy of creating and solving additional congestion between 2 markets, or it can also have a strategy to pursue activation in the most profitable market of the total market sequence. So we find this strategic behavior. What can we say now about the market sequencing options? And herefore there's this table with 4 examples of small strategic BRP portfolios. And the first thing we can see here is that nodal pricing seems most resistive to this strategic behavior. And this can be explained by the fact that you don't really have a sequence in this case. between several markets. Then for the other 3 sequences, you could see here, like, okay, there's like a gap here. So the case where the flexibility market was separate and came first, it could maybe be also have some resistance, but this is really a conclusion we don't want to make, because we only look at 4 examples here and also at 1 reference power system. So therefore we decided we had to generalize this more. And therefore we did a Monte Carlo simulation to also look at the impact really of the market structure. So what was this Monte Carlo simulation? So it was 1,000 runs, and for each run we randomized the BRP portfolio. So the portfolio could contain 0 up to 70 units of different marginal prices. Then the results are shown here, as in the table are the median and average total cost towards consumers, and they're organized with the BRP size. So here in this row, you see all the results for a strategic BRP size of 1 up to 5 units that we had in those different runs, and this goes up and up if you go downwards. What can you see in this table? And I'll guide you through it because it's quite a lot of numbers. So first of all, we see that even small players can exercise market power, and that's something we found in the last slide as well. So here the costs already increase even with small BRP sizes. And the second thing that we found was that nodal pricing outperforms the other market sequences, but the price setter game of larger strategic players can cause crazy distortions. And this you can see here in this column. So if we look at the median total costs, we see that they stay low up to a BRP size of 15. They stay quite low, especially compared to the other market sequences. However, if you look at the average total costs, they start to go up, and as a moment you have a BRP size higher than 15, the prices, the costs actually really became very high. And this was a disadvantage of nodal pricing that we didn't really saw before. And we think we can explain this by the fact is that in our model, we have 1 strategic BRP that can really go up to very high market prices, because our maximum price is 3,000 euro per megawatt hour. And this is compared to other papers. This is different because in other papers, this range is rather limited, often because they go to an EPEC formulation to keep this more solvable. However, we still like to say that nodal pricing outperforms the other market sequences, and this is because it really makes sense to filter out these results that are very distorted, as they will be very easy to detect due to their high market power. Then for the other market sequences, the numbers didn't really indicate another a reason for having a second best. So that's something in conclusion that we can't make here. Then the limitations of the model, and we like to express them of overestimations of strategic behavior and underestimations that we have in our model. So one reason for an overestimation is the reference power system, because we only look at 1 power system. It's not because you take another power system that the game that we find will be there as well. However, the other way around is also the case, because we found, for example, by just adding a more expensive biogas plant at the congested light node at distribution level, already created other games that I didn't show here today. So it's really also a reason for underestimation of strategic behavior. Then another thing we didn't include is reservation of flexibility, which is known to reduce strategic behavior. We also didn't look at risk-averse behavior of the flexibility providers, which can be due to uncertainty or penalties that are there, or other market players. Then a final thing we didn't take into account is demand response, which is also known to reduce the ability of strategic players to exercise their market power. Then there's one less reason for underestimation, and this is of system operators, actually, from the TSO and the DSO, because we already found like 2 reasons for conflicts of interest among them. So this can be another underestimation of strategic behavior that we did not find in this research. Then I like to end the presentation by recapping the conclusions for one last time. So we had 2 major findings here that I explained now. So first, that flexibility markets can trigger new games that can already be performed by small players, and therefore are a real concern for market surveillance. And also that nodal pricing performs best, but there is no clear second best under the alternative market sequencing options. So yes, that was it from my side. I'm curious to hear any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yeah. I have some questions if I can start. I was wondering, this is just a technical questions about when you use the reference power system. I don't know if probably because I don't know this and you choose specific technologies to locate in different zones, in different nodes. And I was wondering, as you said, then the conclusion that some of the results are also related to the choice that you make concerning this localization of technologies. And I was wondering if this is something that is usually done, or I mean, what is the reason of the choice to put the gas in the south and coal in the north, etc. So this was
I think for this one, so I can go back to it. The reason we took this reference power system was because there was this paper of Evert and Schlecht that looks at the in the game in a more intuitive way. And we thought, and they state themselves that it's after the case of Germany. So therefore we thought it was like a good idea to build further of this on this. But yes, it's true that especially at a distribution level, a lot is happening, and we make a very simple representation. So therefore, I think it's also a good thing that the conclusions that we have are not too dependent on the power system as well.
Okay. Because I was wondering also in the fact that the strategic behavior, I mean the possibility to realize strategic behavior, how much this conclusion relies on the fact that you have a single technology or a single operator in each zones. I don't know if I correctly understood on the model, because I mean it's quite complex, and
yes.
I was wondering. I mean, for instance, when I see this system, it looks like to me like in the northern node there is some kind of competition, which is done by the fact that you have wind supply and you have also traditional generator, while in the south you have just a single technology. So I think maybe a single operator. So also the kind of competition that you have in the 2 nodes is different, and therefore also the possibility for implementing a strategic behavior can be different. So this is, I don't know if it is if it has an impact on the model itself, because I don't know, also wind provider can have strategic behaviors, right? Or they are supposed to be competitive.
What was the last thing that you added?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if also renewable supply are supposed to be strategic, or they are the producer are not strategic, are just the distributor and the TSO which have strategic behaviors.
No, so we try to really randomize so that especially at the end, that everyone could be strategic at some point, and even could have like very different portfolios. So yes, that's quite randomized. And then for the the other thing you say, I think it doesn't really form like a problem. It's especially, I think, even more, even a bigger reason that if you add more things, yes, more things can even happen. Because I made a variation, for example, by simulating, like adding some of those bits for the natural gas also in the distribution node, and already a lot of different things were happening. So I think maybe that's an interesting case if you really go deeper into the games and the understanding of the games, especially as it's because often because there's a sequence of market, you really can go start to think about the whole framework, like what else can happen. For example, at a certain moment, I could really say, I think if I add natural gas at that node, it will behave like that. So yes, I think you make a fair comment, and that is a reason that I think you can make a whole new paper about different reference power systems.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question if there's time left. Yeah, so it's such a pity that Ingmar couldn't be here, because this Ingmar Schlecht is my co-author in the paper for the previous presentation. He couldn't be here, and such a pity. He could have had much more feedback for you. But my question is that, okay, I understand that you use a simple model so that you want to make a point and get it across. But from in the next step, if we want to decide about, for example, Germany, what is the requirement? So you need big computational power, a lot of assumptions on where things are, and then if you assume that you have everything, all the assumptions you can make, then you need to model it using EPEC models, or what type of, in a later stage, not in this paper, but in a later stage, if you want to apply to real world, what else do you need?
So yes, we didn't go to the EPEC, so yes, you could go over there, but yes, I don't know if it's really practical to really model it all. I think it could be more, yeah.
You know, my comment is only for future research. I understand just pointing out and everything is enough, but a reader could be curious about, like, if I want to apply to real world now, what are my next steps? That was my question. I'm not saying that this should be a part of this paper, but it's nice to give hints for the others for later stages. Yeah.
I think all of the limitations of the model. And especially interesting is a reference power system, like Silvia also mentioned, because that will be the case for every country. And then you can really show the complexity that maybe like regulation at a European level for flexibility markets isn't really a good case. That's something, a pathway you could go there. In a pathway we want to go further in my PhD is actually to focus on this one. So the strategic behavior of system operators. We want to go deeper into that by also thinking about these rules of pre-qualification that are currently there at the moment.
Yeah, thank you.
And so yes, if you can show your colleague that we built further on his paper, it's always nice.
He'll be happy. Yeah, I'll let him know.
Yes. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ellen. I think we can switch to Evert, our last speaker, and I think we are on time. So thank you.
Hi guys. Yeah. So do you all see my slides already?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I'm delighted to present my third chapter of my PhD thesis. Basically, the title has slightly changed. It's called Seductive Subsidies: An Analysis of Second-Degree Moral Hazard in the Context of Solar Systems. And I'm here in this session because the question is basically who benefits from subsidies. But most importantly, I think I'm here in this session because I get a COVID vaccination tomorrow morning on my usual original session. So I think that this is quite something new. So I welcome you for this last presentation yeah, I think it's quite different. So I hope you will enjoy. Anyway, so why have I written this paper? So as you all are aware, there's a lot of money going into subsidies spent on the adoption of the energy transforming technologies, for example, solar systems. And so there's a recent stream of literature, which is also kind of the core hypothesis of my PhD, that energy transforming technologies have a credence component. So what and why is that? So a very provocative statement is maybe that if you want to build a solar system on your roof, then this is similar as going to visit a dentist or a car mechanic with your broken car. So this is may seem strange, but what kind of the similarity between both situations is that there's asymmetric information between the consumer, who's typically not really aware of what technology would suit his roof best, whether he should get monocrystalline or polycrystalline modules and all this. So he visits an expert, which is in this case an installing firm, an installer, who performs a diagnostic, looks at the roof and says, okay, I would recommend you this system maybe. And at the same time, he installs and charges for the services. So we have this problem of supply-induced demand. So the consumer with this asymmetric information cannot really verify whether the technology is actually received is optimal for him. And therefore, the installer might have incentives to overcharge him, to surcharge him on service inputs or technological inputs, or maybe even reduce the labor input when he's installing a solar system. So yes, as I said, so this credence component of energy technologies is somewhat a recent literature stream, and the inefficiencies in the credence goods literature typically studied are overcharging for basically inflating costs, putting higher bills, and also reduced labor input. And these two inefficiencies have also been documented already in the solar system, in the market for solar systems. So what is particularly interesting in the literature on the credence goods, and what I thought was very relevant for solar systems, is the existence of second-degree moral hazard. So the credence goods literature basically states that second-degree moral hazard is the impulse of the supply side, or the expert or the installer, to increase prices and or reduce labor input when consumers receive third-party reimbursements. So when the dentist, for example, knows that you're insured, he might provide you more extensive and more expensive services compared to when you weren't insured, because you don't bear the full cost of this additional treatments. So this is the idea behind second-degree moral hazard, or as the economists put it very pertinently, if a service provider knows someone else is paying your bills, he's more likely to rip you off. So basically, what does it mean for the adoption of solar systems? I asked myself. So subsidies are third-party reimbursements. Whenever an installer knows that the consumer will receive a subsidy decreasing the investment costs for this technology, he might be prone to second-degree moral hazard, meaning that he might increase costs or reduce labor input when installing the system. And this is what I actually want to study in this paper. So in this paper, I quantified the impact of different subsidy levels on total costs and electricity output of systems in California. That is the idea. So I hope the means or the aim of this paper is clear now. So a quick outlook on what am I doing and how I'm doing this. So I'm using observational data in California. I'm using an instrumental variable strategy in combination with a rich set of fixed effects to address potential confounding factors. And I find that larger subsidy levels are indeed associated with the increase in costs of solar systems. Furthermore, these inefficiencies in this market are somewhat in line with hypothesized drivers of inefficiencies. And I find that very reassuring and interesting. So for example, there's more than 140,000 subsidy solar systems in this program which I'm studying, which I'm showing to you in a minute. And for example, the first two installed by each installer were subject to a mandatory field inspection, meaning that the program administrator would send out staff to perform a field inspection of the work at the place. And so this exogenous rule kind of imposes that the exogenous increase of verification on the work of installers, and this I find evidence suggesting that this reduces the cost of solar systems. Furthermore, there's been quite some literature in this market. So in California, you can also lease solar systems. So the consumer wouldn't own them, but a third party would own them and therefore also receive the subsidies. The third party would just kind of build it on the consumer's roof. And there's been quite some literature on irregularities in this market because these leasing systems might face different incentives than home-owned system installers. And I find that this association of higher subsidies and total and increased costs is particularly large for these firms when systems are leased. Furthermore, the costs are more increased for government customers compared to commercial customers and less increased for and lower for non-profit customers compared to commercial customers, which kind of indicates that installers do really care for who bears the cost. So I think the rationale behind it, my interpretation of this result is that maybe government consumers are again financed by third-party money, taxes. So there might be another layer of this third-party reimbursements, while non-profit customers, non-profit organizations are typically well, not financially well endowed, and therefore, yeah, the installer might have different social distance also to them. So what am I exactly doing here? So I'm studying the California Solar Initiative, or CSI. It rolled out in 2007, over 10 years, and it spent more than $2 billion to install nearly 2,000 megawatt of solar systems. The program was rolled out in 3 investor-owned utilities, or IOUs. These are basically local energy service providers, and they all have like territories in California, like mutually exclusive territories. And if you were a consumer in one of these 3 IOU territories, you could apply for the subsidy system. You could apply for the subsidies. So it's quite interesting. The program offers 2 different kinds of subsidies, and basically upfront subsidies were intended for residential customers who own a system, a smaller system, lower than 30 kilowatt, and they are paid proportionally to the expected output of the system. So the consumer would kind of describe what kind of system he's installing. He would also give the size of his roof and the position of his roof, and the program administrator would thereby calculate the expected output and multiply this with a subsidy rate. At the same time, there are output-based subsidies, which are intended for commercial systems, which are larger and on average quite a lot larger. And these subsidies are paid on actual electricity production. So not on expected, but actual electricity production. And there's a flat cents per kilowatt hour rate paid for each actually produced kilowatt hour of the system. So in the paper, I have a somewhat theoretical, more detailed description. However, I think the intuition is maybe that these output-based subsidies may be more robust to this moral hazard story because they kind of directly incentivize high-quality installations, and yeah. And I do find that the second-degree moral hazard story is relevant for this upfront subsidies, but not for the output-based subsidies. However, if you look at the, so how are the subsidy levels actually determined? If you look at this table here, I'm not sure whether you can see it. The main takeaway from this table is that there are different steps of total capacity already installed within an IOU. And once the capacity within an IOU, the total capacity installed, pass a threshold, then the subsidy level would decrease. So the idea behind it was that if you come to also increase competition, so if you come early, kind of, then you receive a large subsidy. If all of your neighbors, if for example, or no, if 70 megawatts have been installed within the IOU, then the subsidy level drops sharply. And this was both for upfront and output-based subsidy. So the theoretical, so this is the kind of predetermined subsidy schedule, which is somewhat, or which is exogenously kind of reduces or puts variation to the subsidy levels. However, at the same time, in the next slide, I show you the actual subsidy levels received by consumers. So on the we have on the left panel upfront subsidies, on the right panel we have output-based subsidies. And you see here on the Y scale the subsidy levels, and then the X scale the date, kind of the evolution. And we would have expected from this earlier table, first of all, sharp lines, not fuzzy lines, because we would have expected like only 10 different subsidy levels basically attributed within the market. And at the same time, for each IOU, they're distinctive by color, we would have expected to observe monotonic declines, because once this threshold was passed, in the time, each future or each new applicant should receive a lower subsidy rate. So we see these differences here. So first of all, we see fuzzy lines, and we don't see a monotonic decline. And the CSI handbook doesn't really provide any information on why there is these differences. So these basically we have more than 1,000 different subsidy levels here for the upfront subsidies, and some consumers receive weighted averages of these subsidy levels, and I don't know why. So this raises the threat of self-selection into specific subsidy levels, because I can't really rule out that. Well, yeah, I don't know. So maybe consumers or installers were able to self-select into specific subsidy levels. Same story is or same picture emerges for output-based subsidies. So what I do next, I will come to how we deal with this concern of self-selection in a minute. I want to first of all explain you the kind of first step in my empirical strategy, which is an OLS analysis with a rich set of fixed effects. So basically this part of the paper is based or pretty much related to Pless and Van Bentham. And so they have this OLS regressions where the independent variable is either the cost or electricity output of the system per watt. So we divide basically the total cost by the size of the system. This is standard. It's kind of standard in this literature. It's a technical convention. Then we have the subsidy level, which is more or less exogenously varied. Then we have fixed effects, regional fixed effects, so fixed effects for things going on within the IOU, and also county fixed effects to, for example, control for different levels of competition within these counties, because they have shown to affect installation costs of systems. Furthermore, we have installer fixed effects. So we actually control for baseline characteristics of installers, such as, I don't know, higher wages or larger travel costs because they're in a more remote area. I employ technology fixed effects. So basically I have fixed effects for the make and the model of the modules and inverters to control for time invariant differences, for example, in the quality, polycrystalline versus monocrystalline, and all this. I further employ a set of control variables, a vector of control variables. So I employ the number of modules and inverters installed in the solar system as a proxy for the size. Then I have an indicator of the J system installed by an installer, which is basically indicating the experience of the installer he has already exerted, because there's some literature showing that learning by doing decreases the installation costs of solar systems by a lot. And I have the control for the age of the system. Then I control for the timely kind of components, because we have a sample period over 10 years and hardware costs decline quite a lot over this period. I control for this timely component by employing monthly fixed effects. Epsilon is a standard error term, and standard errors are clustered at zip code level. This is because there's regional CSI offices reporting the data, and therefore to control for any correlation within these CSI offices, regional CSI offices. So as I said, there's this potential office issue that differences in predetermined actually supplied subsidy levels could indicate that installers were able to influence subsidy levels and self-select into specific subsidy levels. So for this reason, I exploit plausibly exogenous variation of the predetermined subsidy level as part of an IV. And my instrument is pretty much straightforward and very intuitive. I actually use the predetermined schedule in the table, which I've showed you. So the subsidy level, which the consumer should have received according to this table as an instrument. So this instrument is highly relevant because the differences between actually and predetermined subsidy levels were not really that far away. In addition, I think it is reasonably to believe that it is that the exclusion restriction holds, because this predetermined schedule, it is unlikely that any installer or consumer could have an effect on this predetermined schedule, and also the market power of these installers wouldn't be enough to even increase or slow down the total capacity of solar systems installed within an IOU. Furthermore, I use the exclusion restriction as conditional on a set of control variables, and I employ the same set of fixed effects in the first stage. For robustness, and then I'm doing a couple of robustness checks. For example, drop applications in the vicinity of ±2 weeks to kind of account for people who might have self-selected, speed up the application process to apply before a rebate level drop date and therefore receive a higher subsidy rate. So I drop similar to what is done in the literature. I drop observations in the vicinity of such a rebate level drop date. Then there is this potential threat of the result that you might argue that maybe solar systems with a particularly bad environment for production have opted into the program early because only the high subsidy levels made the investment viable. So to control for this, or to make sure that this is not our driving the results, I explicitly control for the electricity output potential of the respective solar systems. Then I look at self-installed systems to see whether there is no effect where there shouldn't be an effect, because self-installed systems should not be prone to this moral hazard story, second-degree moral hazard story. I also do kind of a robustness of the identification strategy by using nearest neighbor matching. So I match solar systems receiving the exact same technology, exact same type of modules and inverters, and were installed in the same quarter of the year. And then I define the treatment variable as either being treated if they receive a subsidy level above the median or below the median. And I thereby identify the average treatment effect on the treated. And then I use some different specifications on the assumptions of the time components and remove the monthly fixed effects and employ linear, quadratic, or cubic time trends. So long story short, I think I'm also running out of time. So let me show you the main results. So this is the cost of these upfront costs. Sorry, this is the regression results applied to the regression results for the upfront systems receiving the upfront subsidy. And here we see that we have in the first two columns, I have all observations included. In the second two columns, I drop observations in the vicinity of ±2 weeks, in the vicinity of a rebate level drop date. We see that OLS estimates and 2SLS estimates for both kind of subsets are quite similar, and there's not much difference between OLS and 2SLS, suggesting that there's no, or the endogeneity bias is not too much of a threat here. And this basically is positive and statistically significant increase has to be interpreted that a $1 subsidy level increase is associated with an increase of the cost per watt of the system of approximately 25 cents, which I interpret as second-degree moral hazard. So now quickly on these robustness checks, I've shown you that these effects are quite, or I have told, or I have these effects, this is quite robust to this story of additionality, that only early systems or particularly bad systems opt in early. Then I don't see an effect on self-installed system, which is somewhat reassuring. I do see an effect which is a bit smaller though, but I do see an effect for a different identification strategy, which is the nearest neighbor matching. And also the effect is robust to different specifications and assumptions of the time. So let me quickly show you the regression results on the cost per watt of these output-based systems, of these systems which are larger and receive subsidies on actual production. So here we do not see any significant effect at all. And for this, for these systems, I also have the electricity data on the electricity output of these systems. And here I do not see any effect. So this indicates that well, these output-based subsidies, systems receiving output-based subsidies are not necessarily prone to hazard, to second-degree moral hazard, as this direct financial incentive of high energy production might prevent installers from exerting this kind of behavior. Finally, very quickly, I wanted to show you these heterogeneous effects. So basically, I want to focus you here on the first two columns. because the other ones are related to this null effect I've shown you before. So here I do the same as before, but I interact the variable of the subsidy level with an indicator variable, indicating whether a system is subject to a mandatory field inspection because it was among the first two installed by an installer. And indeed, this being among the first two decreases the average cost of such systems. In line with the intuition behind this increased verification. Then here we have the leasing systems. We see that this association between large subsidy levels or higher subsidy levels and larger costs are specifically pronounced. And also these leased systems are on average much more expensive, as I said, in line with earlier literature suggesting that this leasing market is there's plenty of irregularities going on. And finally, you see here the same as before, this subsidy level variable interacted with an indicator for the sector behind the consumer. And we see that government and non-profit systems of governmental customers are more expensive than commercial customers, and those of non-profit systems are less expensive. At the same time, these cost reduction in non-profit systems is on average kind of outweighed by an increased second-degree moral hazard or association of larger subsidy levels and larger costs. So let me conclude. So what have I done? I have employed this V strategy to account for potential self-selection to subsidy levels and further control for a wide range of potential other confounding factors. And I find a significant association of larger upfront subsidy levels and increased costs. So this shows, I think, which is very important, because this is somewhat the first study to study this second-degree moral hazard, and I think it has important consequences because there's so much money involved in these subsidies. So it shows that these programs need to be robust towards inefficiencies induced by the credence component of energy transforming technologies, such as supply-side inefficiencies. And in line with what one might think, the verification of work can maybe be a way to decrease these inefficiencies. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to receive any questions or suggestions which you might have.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions before.
Yeah, I do have a question for Evert.
Go, Filippo.
So I was surprised by the results of the table in which you showed that the relationship between the subsidy and the cost of electricity. No, it was one of the first tables at the beginning.
Yeah.
So after a certain threshold, the cost of electricity decreases. Is it right, or I misunderstood it?
So you mean this table?
No, it was in the descriptive part at the beginning. Like,
sorry, my computer is lagging. This one?
Yeah, this.
Yes. So this was exactly. So this was, sorry, yeah.
Okay, no, go for it, because I was thinking that you may include also the square of the subsidy in the OLS regression. If there's I mean, it's not a proportional relationship between the subsidy and the cost. I don't know if probably my question is not correct at all, and I don't know I probably misunderstood the main message, but I was thinking that you may also have the square of the subsidy in your OLS regression to estimate the relationship with the cost of electricity, but here the relationship is different. So the two variables are not the ones I was mentioning too. Because I saw you included the quadratic of the trend in the OLS.
In the robustness, yes, exactly.
In the robustness,
yes.
Okay.
And you suggest to put the square of the quadratic of the subsidy, basically, to see
of the subsidy in your main OLS regression. If there is, if you suspect that there is a U-shaped relationship between your two main variables, I don't know, maybe.
Okay. Is there any particular reason for why you think that this relationship would be?
No, I was surprised by this table. So different subsidy levels. There's a threshold after which the cost.
Sorry, I can also zoom.
So this decreasing.
This is just the design of the subsidy program administrator, right? So this is just like a priori. Now I can't zoom out. Sorry. This is like a priori how the people try to foster the adoption the most by giving large subsidy levels early to make people apply, and then kind of phase them out over time. Yes. So, but
it's just a matter of the program.
It's a matter of the program. Exactly.
Okay.
So it's this is basically copied from the program handbook. Yeah.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
I see that Ali has a question also.
Thank you. So I have a question. So the difference between upfront guys and output-based guys is that upfront ones have residential systems, which means they probably have their own demand, and output-based subsidies are for the ones that probably don't consume anymore. So that's my question. First of all, is there this distinction, or no? All of them, whether they are residential or commercial, they're gonna have some demands. I want to see whether these two types of systems are comparable at all or not. That's the question.
So you're talking about demand, whether they kind of demand their own production.
Yeah, because the money they make is they get some money from the regulator, and the other thing is that the money that they don't pay for demand is is a part of their profit, right?
Yeah.
And then I just want to see if the two types of residential and commercial ones, both of them had demand and exposed this, extra profit from not paying the tariffs to the regulator, the consumption tariffs or something like that.
Okay, so basically, yeah. So let me try. So the two subsidies were theoretically they were very distinct, like from the program administrator, but basically the attribution of subsidies was also not that not as distinct as said before. So for example, there are systems some systems smaller than 30 kilowatt hours receiving output-based subsidies, and there's again not really clear why. And then in addition, customers between 10 and kilowatts. So if you were installing a system of more than 10 kilowatt, you could basically choose the subsidy type. So you could opt in either subsidy type. So I didn't include this analysis in the presentation, but this would obviously also I studied this in the paper to see whether there's any effect of these subsidies of these guys who could opt into a specific subsidy level, which concerning to your question should then be very similar from size and demand, I guess. And so what we don't find any difference in this. We don't find any particular difference or with respect to this. So first of all, we don't find any bunching. So we don't find any strategic opting into either subsidy type. So the distribution of size. So if you would say, for example, I want to really receive an output-based subsidy, I will build in the system which is just above 10 kilowatt hours, or if I want to build an upfront system that I want to. So we don't find any bunching on this. And then we don't find any particular differences within this subset of customers who could opt into the customers for the subsidy level, for the second degree more hazard, basically. Yeah.
I see. And one last thing, whenever I see a threshold, I think of this. I'm not empirical economist, so maybe I'm missing something here, but whenever there's a threshold, I think of RDD, regression of discontinuity. Yes. Probably you have thought about it, and what about that? Yeah.
So it is true that I have thought about it, and I've done some stuff. So I have quickly mentioned this, that people in the literature using the same data set drop observations in ±2 weeks before a rebate level drop, because they see some bunching just before the application rate. So this is basically, I think, the kind of rule out argument for doing an RDD, because you would expect an equal distribution of both sides of the date, and you don't see it. So this is why people don't use RDD when using this data. So usually people, so the first step people do is doing, or mostly this OLS regressions, and I actually, so because I don't know, I found this irregularity, so I added this IV strategy to this paper, and yeah. So I obviously was the first idea I had also to go for. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Threshold you want RDD. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
So just have a quick follow-up question to the one before. So the main message of the tables that you showed for, can you go back to the
which one?
The OLS results you showed us, like where you include also the regressor with the first two equal one.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm going there.
Yeah, first two equal one. What does it mean in as a main takeaway message of your paper? Is that the early receivers of the subsidies get a stronger reduction in the cost? This is what I don't get.
So this first two equals one is basically just an indicator whether systems are subject to a mandatory field inspection or not. So it's of course they are like the first two installed by each installer, but they, and then as I said at the beginning, then the staff of the program administration would come out and check whether the system is properly installed. And since installers know this rule, they kind of anticipate that they will be verified to a higher extent. And this rule already decreases the cost of such systems. So this is my interpretation of this table, that kind of a credible threat of that your work is being inspected afterwards and verified reduces the cost.
Nice. Very good result.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I was happy when I think they're all in line with the intuition, at least, and with what I, not all, but they are. I don't know. There's, if you want to check out the paper, is available. I have a small, simple model which kind of can explain what is happening in more detail.
Thank you very much. I have just a simple remark. I was thinking that this increasing cost due to the subsidies can somehow also be considered as a sort of counterpart of the fact that if you have to measure the output, you have to incur an additional cost due to measuring. Therefore, the fact that you go for upfront subsidies somehow it does increase the cost, but also compensate this increasing cost compensate the fact that you don't have to measure additional output, you see, and especially if you are dealing with a small installation, this can counterbalance the large cost, because if you have to measure all additional output for small installation, you have to incur an additional cost, which can be maybe larger. So somehow this additional cost may be justified also by the fact that you don't have to measure output. So this is just general remark.
Okay. So first of all, I think that all subsidy systems, so I didn't say it here, but the rule was that all solar systems need to be connected to some device measuring the electricity production, but only that of these output-based systems need to be reported. But it's true that the requirements, for example, on the measuring capacity, measuring devices for this output-based systems needed to be more precise and therefore most likely more expensive. At the same time, it is true, but I think this, I'm not sure how I should, or how you would interpret this, because
probably additional cost. I don't know if the additional cost of managing all this data and I don't know, saving and managing all this data can somehow counterbalance this inefficiency.
Okay,
I don't know, because I don't know how much will it cost, but since measuring is also sometimes considered as a quite expensive activity, especially at residential level, someone can argue that this kind of system can have this disadvantage.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to add one more sentence about this implication, also you say that having in the first 2 rounds, but there was a checkup, then the cost reduced, and maybe you can say, okay, what was the cost of sending, I know, a couple of people there to check the installations and whether it is worth it or not, or like, I don't know, the regulator could say with 10% probability we will send somebody, and then because there's this probability, even though they have to pay for men to go check it, but it could be, I don't know what is the labor cost there, but there could be a back of envelope type of calculation to say, okay, maybe it's worth it or not, something like that.
Yes, thank you. Interesting point. Yeah. Yeah. So I will. It's going to be difficult to find it, and there is also so these first 2 are 100% verified, and then there is in general the program administrator has the right to randomly audit kind of every system. So there is, even for the 3rd, 4th, there is some probability that you are verified, but there is no exact details given on how big this probability is.
I see.
But so yeah. So, but thank you. I will consider this. Yeah.
I think that our time is running out. So I thank you, all of you, very much. It was a very interesting session. So enjoy the rest of the conference and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hopefully in person next time.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye. Have a nice
Bye-bye.
day.
Goodbye. Have a nice day.